here's the premise.
Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. India's real education challenges. Where do they stand? How do we stack them up and how do we take them on? The big question we're putting to Parth Shah of the Center for Civil Society, Mohandas of Manipal Global Education, Dr. Sadhana Parashar, Director of the Central Board of Secondary Education, and Ramya Venkatraman from McKinsey, who has worked extensively on education, of course, with me, Cricketwala and Ayaz Memon. Ayaz, where do we begin?
Well, I think it's got off to kind of a, false start,
yes.
The ministry,
yeah.
For reasons, it could be a storm in a teacup. Hopefully, it will be that, and we get down to the real agenda, which is looking at improving the quality of education, and then, of course, also addressing the fact that you might drop so many educated people. How do you get them jobs? How do you accommodate them in the building up of the nation?
Right, got it. Okay, so let's get a quick sense of what are the key challenges ahead for the overall education system, primary education, secondary education, some of the other policy issues within that from our panelists. And let me begin with Mohandas. Mohan, do you want to kick off with what you feel from your vantage point are the key challenges to be addressed for the government, even as we figure out who's going to run the show and how they're going to do it?
Well, I think the key challenge for the government is to improve the quality of education. For the last 10-15 years, we have solved the problem of access in primary and secondary education. We have a large number of schools, infrastructure is improving, but quality is abysmal and quality has fallen down. In the higher education area too, we have about 30 million young people in college, is growing at 7% a year. A large number of universities have come up, but the quality problem has to be solved. So I think the big challenge is quality all across and affordability to some extent, because many students can't afford to go to good colleges. And the government has tried many things to solve this problem, but has not been successful. In the primary, secondary school system, the only way to solve the quality problem is to make sure that the good schools, whether government or private, are freely allowed to expand. Because quality is a function of good management in educational institutions. When you speak about a good school, we speak about the school management which delivers high quality, good education. So you must give them a free rein to expand all over this country, and hopefully students will get a choice of going to good schools, and if they go to good schools, that is 90% of the job done. As far as higher education is concerned, our universities have been deprived of freedom, they lack the autonomy, both academic, financial, as well as administrative. I was sitting on a rating discussion with Sudha Pai, who is the dean of Jawaharlal Nehru University. She's telling me stories of nightmares where she had to plead with you for 9 months to hire an associate professor, but the UC saying, no, you go hire a professor. So they have no freedom because UC gives money. So I think we must give full autonomy to all the universities, let them float or sink. Why is Oxford successful? Why is Harvard successful? Why is Yale successful? Why is University of Tokyo successful? Why is Tsinghua University successful? Peking University successful? Because they administer themselves, they run everything. UGC lays down norms, they control the purse string, AICTE lays down norms, they try to protect everything. In the last 60 years, there's been a steep downward slide. So all the universities should be given the freedom to operate, and they will set up their own governance. Some of them will die, but students will have a choice of good universities. And if you fund the students to study higher education to a scholarship program or otherwise, you would have solved the problems, and in 10 years you'll have a strong, vibrant system. The existing system is rotten, it has become corrupt, too centralized, and it has become an excuse for mediocrity, and we must break the logjam, and I think this is what needs to be done.
Okay, Mohan, I think you've given us a comprehensive view. Let's get someone who from another practitioner like you, but from government. Dr. Parashar, can you tell us, from your sense and your vantage point as a director at CBSE, what are the key challenges that you see ahead? You run a pretty large school system. You've got almost 9,000 schools, if not more, as part of your system today.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's more than 15,000 schools that we have, pan-India, and also in 23 other countries. And I think even for us, even though our schools, the general perception is that they are schools which are better than in any other system, but we have government schools, especially in the Delhi, in the UT of Chandigarh, in Arunachal Pradesh, in Sikkim, in Andaman and Nicobar, and we face much the same problems because of the diversity that we cater to, that there is a lot of focus required on excellence and quality, both in terms of the training and capacity building of teachers, in the capacity building of heads of schools, and in looking at more opportunities for students, so that not just in terms of content but in terms of skill, so that there are, right from the school level, there is a platform where you can nurture life skills such as problem solving, decision making, creative and critical thinking, effective communication and interpersonal skills, because these are the ones which are going to stand you in good stead. Marks and excellence in academics are important, but there also needs to be a focus on the core-scholastic areas, which include values as well as life skills.
Right. So are you saying that, if I were to say that at this point of time, your key challenges speaking from a Central Board of Secondary Education system point of view, would you say that they are more on the intangibles, like which you just pointed out, or would it be more on the tangibles at this point of time?
Definitely, it has to be a lot of focus on the soft skills as well, because keeping in mind that a very small percentage of students get into highly professional institutes, there is a large number of students, even within the CBSE system, which needs to get into universities, and as well look at upward mobility through vocational education. So the focus of the CBSE has been in strengthening its vocational education component and making education, even at the school level, related to the real world outside. We've started a lot of new subjects, but unfortunately, there's no vertical mobility for these subjects. And when that happens at the tertiary education level, then students do not know that if they take these subjects at school level, such as entrepreneurship, such as, we've introduced Python now as a language in one of our computer courses. We've also introduced mass media and mass media production. We've introduced heritage education. We've introduced knowledge, tradition and practices of India. But what happens when they go to the university? Unless there is a greater flexibility in the university system, then it is difficult for students to take up these innovative subjects at the school level. The third thing is that we've also started something called accreditation of schools, much on the lines of NAC, because we feel that the quality of schooling needs to be something to be focused on again.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to come back to you, and I also noticed that you've introduced Mandarin as of April as an elective for your schools, apart from human rights as a subject, and that's very interesting. Let me come to you, Parth. Parth, now you've looked at this as a non-profit, as a body which is focused on improving the quality of education. Tell us what you think are the 2 or 3 key issues that the incoming government needs to look at this point of time.
I think in terms of the problems in education, either school or higher education, I think there is quite a bit of consensus on those problems. I think larger challenge for us, I think, as we try to solve those problems, is to figure out and agree on a framework through which we can address this problem in a systemic manner. From that point of view, I would say at least 2 issues are central to solving this problem of quality and equity both. One is the funding mechanism of education. So today we are funding schools and colleges directly, and people who go to those schools and colleges get free education by and large, or highly subsidized education. So we need to move away from institutional funding to individual or student funding. So the way I describe it is fund students, not schools or colleges. I think that itself would bring about a lot of transparency in the system. And I think second important thing, it is the accountability. It will begin to emerge when we change the funding system altogether. That's, I think, one important part of it. The second, I think, most important part is the focus of the system in terms of regulation. Today, I think all regulatory systems in school or college focus largely on inputs. So whether you have land plot of this size or not, are your teachers and professors qualified, are you paying the right salaries or not? All of the focus is on input regulation. I think what we need to do is to change that focus to learning outcomes. And if we change that focus and keep that as a central idea to design a regulatory system, then I think we will be able to then achieve that key goal, which is quality education. So I think if you change the funding and make the learning outcome as a focus for regulatory system, then I think we are moving in the right direction. Beyond that, I think there are some other things we need to do, and I'm sure the people who disagree or agree on some of the details of this. I think one big issue that I see have worked so far is the idea of achieving equity, meaning providing equal quality education to all through uniformity or standardization. So the approach we have taken under RTE or other rules and regulations is that let's standardize the system of education, and thereby you will be able to guarantee equitable education. I think that model certainly is not going to work, has not worked so far. I think what we need to understand is the diversity in education, which means individualized education for every child, every student, is what the future of education system is. And we need to sort of move away from this model of uniformity and standardization to accepting more diversity and individualization.
Okay, Ramya, so if I, for lack of any other term, opening comments on the subject. I mean, how do you see the key challenges ahead for India's education system? We are talking, of course, across the board now, both primary and secondary. Okay, Ramya, I think we've lost. Yes, Ayaz, you had a question.
Yeah,
we're going to come back to Ramya in a moment.
Yeah, and this is addressed to anybody who's on the panel or everybody. I think one of the key issues to me is how do you arrest the rate of dropouts, which means, you know, we've talked of equality of education. I also think that there needs to be some kind of social re-engineering, which also comes under the HRD ministry, change of mindset. Unless you get the girl child into schools and let them study till they finish school and gone on to graduation, I don't think most or any of these objectives can be met. So I think this should be a real big thrust area. You arrest the volume of dropouts, and you obviously incorporate or encourage more girls to be into the schooling system or the education system.
Okay, got it. So let me begin, Dr. Parashar, let me come back to you now. I think a couple of points that have come up. One is to do with the learning outcome, as Parth was saying. He also spoke about the mechanism. How do you, I mean, how do you respond to some of these points, particularly on the measurement of outcome? Where do we stand today from your vantage point again specifically, and how does this get better?
You know, I think this is a very important point, because we've moved in the last 5 to 6 years and maybe almost a decade. We are trying to reduce the emphasis on the end of the year exam or the board exam and bring it to school-based assessment, which cannot be successful unless there is a greater emphasis and focus on learning outcomes. So I'd say that in our effort to bring that into schools, around 15,000 schools, which you can look as a pilot in the ocean of schools and the schooling systems that we have across states, our experience has been that it is extremely difficult to bring in standardization. We need a lot of monitoring mechanisms, which we've done through our networking of Sahodyas, which is a network of schools which are located near each other. They get together purely for sharing academic practices. Then we have a network of mentoring. We're also doing big data analysis, and we're also looking at evidence of assessment which comes in from each school, which is looking at what is happening inside a classroom. To print documents such as curriculum documents with learning outcomes mentioned there is not the same thing as implementing it at the grassroots level, which is actually in the classroom, whether it is at primary or upper primary or secondary. So the larger emphasis then has to be to strengthen and handhold the teacher, because if you look at the teacher's role, then there is so many multifaceted skills that she requires, not just to teach, but also to look at the documentation of what is happening in that classroom. And so capacity building has become one of our most important focus areas, and we've partnered and we are hand-holding with at least 60 to 70 agencies in the country now who are involved with us in various ways to do capacity building of teachers for us. Because the pool of teachers is very large, and teachers is walking population. So you train a group of and a batch of and hundreds of teachers in 1 year, and you find the next year a whole lot of new teachers and heads of schools. So this is something which needs to be done on a sustainable basis rather than on a one-off year-to-year thing. It has to be much more than just the CBSE can do. CBSE is at a national level, but it can collaborate with other state boards. We are already doing through our networking of top state.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Mohan.
Govind, the basic problem we are seeing right now is over-centralization, Govind. People sitting in Delhi in the ministry think they have the solution for the ills of this country. It's a large country of 1.2 billion people. There's no country like India so large to run a school system sitting down in Delhi. I think the need for greater centralization to the state boards, empower the states to take their own decision, stop this standardization, allow them to come up with broad guidelines what they have to do, and put money in improving quality at the state level. Now everything is centralized in Delhi. The funding goes to Delhi. A small set of people sit down in Delhi and believe they have the solutions for all the problems of this vast country. And you see it happening two times. This over-centralization, disempowering the states, disempowering the schools is what is doing our school education system. And if you talk getting in things like RTE, which is so very noble, but the consequences have been terrible for the entire country, and CCS can tell you what has happened. Because I think we got to break this logjam. Each state of this country should treat education as if they're an independent country and govern themselves, rule themselves, and improve the quality. And there should be funding coming from the government of India based upon outcomes, so there's an incentive for them to do better and better and better. Now, instead of that, for the last 10, 20 years, we are centralized school education to the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, centralized the school education to the secondary school program, to university program, to UC. Now we've got this RUSA program, it's again going to centralize, make all decision making in Delhi. That's the terrible aspect.
Mohan, I had a question here. So, some people would argue, and I get the feeling that in this particular case of centralization, the quality of education is at a higher level than, let's say, the non-centralized. Normally, you would tend to think that the centralized approach results in quality and standards falling, but in India, it seems to be the other way around, isn't it?
No, look, let us not look at Kendriya Vidyalaya, CBSE, ICSE, because they're all elite schools. They're not government schools or ordinary schools. They require a much higher degree of investment and everything else to manage that. And there are very few schools. In the ultimate analysis, when you've got 225 million children, 5-6 million children in all these schools don't make much difference. To talk about the largest schools, the state board schools, because the state board schools require much more empowerment. And this idea of getting a centralized system of running some schools where 5%, 6% have something which is very, very different with a higher syllabus is not going to work. Take a case of Europe. Govind. Europe is a set of some 30 countries, right? Each country governs its own school system. There's nothing like an EU board running school system because schooling is very local. Please understand, schooling is very local. You can have chains all over, conforming to a common board. That's fine. But for the greater mass, like Europe, you need boards at the level of the city, level of the state, which takes care of education. Look at America. Each state has got its own school board system, and they run very well. They manage very well.
Mohan, what you're saying is, if I were to sum up, is that one key challenge or task ahead for this incoming government, and that's where we started, should be therefore an efficient and adequate decentralization of the school system. Would that be correct?
Decentralization of decision making in terms of quality, standards and everything, and funding based upon outcome. I mean, what my friend from CCS said is very correct. Today, what is the funding? You must have so many classrooms, you must have a toilet, that's fine, but there's hygiene. But go on outcomes. Those schools which get a result more than 90%, incentivize them, allow them to grow. So there's a flight to quality, the good will prosper, the bad will die, and take children to schools, not school to children. India had a policy for the last 20 years of taking school to children. It's worked up to a point, but quality has been poor, management has been poor, there are no teachers in government schools. Now you must think of a system of busing children to good schools up to 20 kilometers. Maybe that will work better because concentrated activity in schooling at some stage is a better alternative.
Okay, Dr. Parashar, let me, I'm not saying that you have to respond to this because you're obviously sitting in a different position as being at CBSE, but how would you see the larger divide, maybe let's say between the elite and education, if one may call it so, and the rest of India, which is really, more than 1 million schools across the country?
One or two points, comments rather, I agree largely with what has been said before. But I would like to say that because we also deal with the government schools, and government schools in the UTs, they cannot be compared to the Kendriya Vidyalayas again. which are though centralized, but there are schools where there is quality because of their monitoring. So I think a system of centralizing and decentralizing needs to have a balance. So I agree that the guidelines can be at a central level, but then like we have 10 regional centers, and even the academics can move through these 10 regional centers because you have networking between schools and an understanding that they need to come together and collaborate. The top-down approach has stopped working in education for a long time. If we look in terms of quality, we need to have people to sit together at a local level and look at the centralized guidelines in terms of implementation. The second thing I'd like to say is that there is, the quality in terms of schools. It's a very diverse school system. Even within the CBSE, there is so much of heterogeneity and diversity in terms of quality. So there have to be some standards, performance standards, to look at the quality of schools. But I'd like to add that it is performance not in terms of just results and quality, which is very unilateral, and it's just a one dimension of what a school is like. Because if you look at a good school and what makes a good school, then it's a lot more. The larger curriculum of a good school doesn't really look at just focus on academic excellence, but a lot more than that.
Okay. Ramya, I think you've joined us. We were trying to obviously get a sense on what are the 2 or 3 key challenges ahead at this point of time to improve the Indian education system at large, and of course fix some of the specific problems. Do you want to come in now?
Govind, this is Ramya here. I think there's been a problem with my connection. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I think just building on a couple of the points made, one critical element for our education system is probably having standardized assessment of learning, and both Parth referred to learning outcomes and Mohan referred to incentives based on outcomes, and both of these probably require a base of standardized learning measurement, which as a country today we lack. And this is something which we would see as an important agenda going forward, where we are able to assess the performance of individual schools, of districts, of states, and probably even encourage the top 2-3 states to participate in international learning assessments. That would be an important one. The second one, there are probably a few catalytic capability building measures that the system more broadly can focus on, such as teacher education. And I would quite agree with the view that individual schools can then function a lot more on their own. But there are a few catalytic things such as teacher education, which the system can do a lot about, and that would involve elements like encouraging a few larger scale, high quality teacher education institutes, probably through public-private partnerships. Figuring out mechanisms for teacher assessment and ongoing certification, and supporting teachers in classroom through highly distributed implementation capability. So some of those kinds of elements.
Ramya, so if I were to ask you for, let's say, in the next 100 days, I mean, what would, in your mind, what should be the one key thing that, let's say, should be focused on, and in order to get things going, what would it be?
So if there was one thing I would, so can I make it 2, which I'm finding it difficult to prioritize. So maybe let me just say 2 things. One, starting a standardized national level assessment of learning outcomes, at least in core subjects. And I fully agree with Dr. Shah about the need for holistic development of children, but at least starting with core subjects, that would be one. The second, probably establishing a framework for high quality private participation in large scale education delivery. And this does not necessarily mean just private schooling, but it also means private contribution to the public education system, whether it's in teacher education, as I was describing earlier, or in running schools or other aspects.
Okay. Parth, let me come back to you. I think Mohan responded to some of the points that you were raising, and speaking more on the outcome as well as the funding, and of course the larger point about a decentralized structure. Where do we stand practically in terms of getting some of these things off the ground?
I think as Mohan pointed out quite rightly, we actually are moving in the opposite direction. So Right to Education Act is actually a first attempt by the central government to centralize the power in its own hands. So I think what we need to do, as to answer your question about first 100 days, what government could do, I think, to help the education system is to amend the RTE, make sure the RTE requirements and the school recognition norms are not focused on inputs, but are focused on learning outcomes. And actually, Gujarat provides a very good model of this, where 85% of the weight in recognizing the school is given to learning outcomes, while only 15% is given to infrastructure norms. I think Gujarat itself provides a very good way to amend the RTE and bring the focus on learning outcomes within the law itself. But today, you would not even find the word learning outcome in the whole of the act. So I think that's the first thing government should do, at least for the school education. I think if you think further along that line, then opening up the school system, right, to more autonomy, not just for private schools, I think even particularly for government schools. So what we advocate is that convert government school funding to a per student funding. So money comes from the government to the government school, but does not come as a lump sum grant every year. It comes in terms of number of students the school has multiplied by some per student funding amount. And that way, then you can hold the school accountable for performance. So you can raise or decrease funding depending on how well the school performs. So you bring not just learning outcome in terms of the law, but also design a funding system that reinforces the focus on learning outcome. Which is why I talked about the funding change and one of the biggest thing government could do. I think my experience in government school has been that the biggest problem I see is the teachers not being available or not being present, or when they are present, they are not teaching. Largely, I think you cannot blame the teachers themselves because they are being posted long distances away from their homes. If I'm living in Bhubaneswar, but I'm posted to teach in farther away in Bolangir, I would not be able to commute every day, nor would I be able to bring my family to live in Bolangir. So I think what we need to do is to begin hiring teachers in government schools at the local level. You can have the same benefits package across the state, but let the local school, the local SMC, the school management committee, or Gram Panchayat make a decision about who are the best qualified teachers for the local school.
Right. Okay.
This way, you bring local into the school system.
I think thought for a second there.
Simple ways of.
Parth, just hold us thought for a second there. Dr. Parashar, let me come quickly to you on 2 points. I think Ramya stressed, for instance, on teacher education and really speeding that up and scaling that up. Obviously, it's happening even as we speak. And the second was learning measurement. And there was a third point, of course, which is coming through is the autonomy and how far down can that autonomy be devolved? And then make it accountable at the school level. How would you like to respond on either of these points or all three? Okay, I think we've got a problem there. Mohan, let me come back to you. So if we are saying that these are the three key problems as I see it now. I mean, we are saying that there's a measurement challenge, there's a teacher training and teacher challenge. There's also a presence of teachers in schools challenge, but that's, let's say, we'll keep that aside for a moment. And there's the larger issue of autonomy. Now, how do we take the autonomy thing forward? Because that's not just an education issue, because that also links to so many other issues which go in beyond the realm of just, let's say, the HRD department.
See, Govind, the important thing that comes out from all this is very clear. It is management. It is the management of the school. That is the critical factor. Now, you centralize management, you have long gaps in accountability, so everything is breaking apart. So that's why you have the private schools where the management is very good, having a superior outcome. You have the ICSE, which has got good management, having a superior outcome. CBSE having a superior outcome. You have the Navodaya school, the Kendriya Vidya schools, the good management having a superior outcome. And they're all very small systems. They're not large systems. That's the important thing. For example, take the state of Karnataka. There are 85 lakh children in school, and there is one board which manages that. There should be some 5 boards in various districts, a district board managing the education in that and making it fully accountable, because it's a very local issue. Each district is very different. The needs of the people are very different. The schooling at Asing is different. Now, you can't have a single standard and push it down. and say that you must comply to that because the teachers are not up to the mark. You go back 20 years when the schooling system was much better and the government school system was much better, things were not so centralized at that point of time. Now things have become centralized, and that's why I'm saying there has to be decentralization, local autonomy, and there has to be better school management, and management has to come down to the districts or the divisions in every single state rather than being in Delhi or in Bangalore. Delhi is disruptive and destructive for the whole of this country. I hold Delhi responsible for that because they centralized in the last UPA government. They centralized all powers in university and school and almost destroy the system because they don't understand. Now, even in the state, if you centralize everything in Bangalore, the districts will not do well because in Bangalore, only Bangalore schools will improve because nobody travels to the districts. So suppose you take the 4 or 5 divisions of Karnataka and there you do it and ask the local boards to have a say and then you monitor them for Bangalore, the outcome will be much, much better. And if you look at, last point I want to make it, if you look at fee-paying schools, if you look at public schools where fees are not paid, the fee-paying schools, if you ask CCS, seem to have a much better outcome, excluding ICSE and all these boards which are smaller and which do well.
Got it. Okay, closing comments. Ramya, do you want to go first? I think we seem to have got a sense on what the 3 or 4 key priorities are. Do you want to add something to this?
No, I think the one priority which we haven't spoken too much about is I think there is a lot that can be done to leverage private energy in larger system transformation. And whether it is with respect to learning outcome measurement, whether it is in teacher education, whether it is in running schools or supporting schools at the local level, there is a lot that can be done. And I think there are some early moves on that front in pockets in terms of coming up with interesting models for private participation. But these are still just early steps. And I think getting a framework around that where high quality private entities can participate in a financially and operationally viable manner in larger system transformation would be another priority that I would just add to your list.
Okay, Parth, as we go next 100 days, I mean, I'm assuming that some of this to operationalize is not going to be easy, and some of it is indeed a much longer and larger task going beyond 5 years perhaps. But what would be the policy kickers that we could see, or the pronouncements that we could see, which would give us comfort that things are moving in this direction?
I think, as I said, first thing should be amend the RT and keep the focus of RT on learning outcomes and not infrastructure norms. The first thing it will do is to stop closing down on low-fee budget private schools. There are about more than 1,000 schools in Punjab have already been closed down. Like several 100,000 students are now going to be out of school, where actually right to education, they're supposed to provide a right, currently taking away the right that students already have. So I think it's important to amend the RT, take the burden off the budget private schools, let them function to the extent that they are performing well. I think that's the one bigger immediate role that government needs to play, to stabilize the system before doing anything else. Once we've done that, I think they convert all the funding to per child funding, which can be done quite easily. It would not take that long to actually, we have worked on these formulas, how it can be done. And you can easily convert within a span of 3 months or so, the funding to a per child basis, and then hold the schools accountable in private as well as government and private aided government, both kinds of schools. So I think there are 2-3 biggest things that government could do immediately. I think moving forward, I think the biggest thing we need to do is the mindset change. I think today the education establishment, particularly the government, but as well as outside in the non-profit sector and the NGOs, is very anti-private sector. Somehow they see private sector as, well, worse than necessary evil, right? So I think we need to understand the private sector has an important role to play. Now the times have changed. We are no longer in 19th century where you can have what was the European model was. I think how do we encourage the private sector to play the right kind of a role, and therefore how do we design the ecosystem where the private sector plays its role in a way to further the goals of national education and learning.
Right.
I think that bigger mindset is on the role of private sector, and there are, I think, different models available for Bangladesh, the voucher model that's implemented for girls education,
right, okay.
Punjab Education Foundation.
But
right?
Ayaz has a question.
In that mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think we've spoken a lot about the quality of education or quality education and Right to Education Act, RTE, whether it's a political gambit which has any need, really serves any purpose, which is fine. But there is a socio-philosophical need that there must be education for everybody. I think a literate country is a great example of soft power, much as excellence in sport is. So unless you spread the dragnet wide, I think that you will not perhaps get enough literacy levels
or
enough
fish into the net, so to speak.
Enough fish into the net. I think that's also as crucial as just the quality of education.
Right. So, Parth, do you want to come back on this very quickly? I mean, is this spreading the dragnet, which perhaps was the objective of the RTA, and I guess your point would be that this is not quite happening.
Yes, I think that's very true. I think it can be done very easily to amend the RTE and we address this issue almost immediately. Right? I think on the issue of the poor quality, I think that's true across the board. If you look at international standards, against that, our best schools don't stand up. I think there is a reminder for all of us that all schools will have to do better than what we are doing.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Mohan.
Well, the one thing that can dramatically change outcomes in schools and colleges and universities is if the new government was to pass a rule that children of government servants, school teachers, government servants should mandatorily go to government schools, attend government colleges and government universities, and be the recipients of the lousy education that they get. Because if they pass this one single rule, in 5 years' time, you see a dramatic improvement. Now, the people who run the government employees have no stake in the school. They don't care a damn because they're all poor children. As somebody else's children, their children go to the best private schools, the private universities, they go overseas, so they have no stake. So, if you pass this one single big idea and a rule, let me tell you, in 5 years' time, there'll be a dramatical improvement in school education and if, for example, ask all the people in this debate where their children have gone. Have they gone to a government school? Have they gone to a government college? Have they gone to a government university? Please ask them. Then you'll get the answer why things are wrong.
Right. I think it's a fair point, Mohan, and it's been made earlier as well, and it's a very powerful point too. So I think we've collected a good deal of objectives and points for what needs to be really done to fix the HRD challenges that are lying ahead, as opposed to focusing on the minister and where she comes from and so on. So I think we're looking at 3 or 4 things. One is we're looking at the role of private sector. We're looking at potentially amending the right to education. We're talking about greater focus on teacher education. We're talking about a better quality, better approach to measurements of learning and learning outcomes. And we're also talking about saying that can we decentralize and federalize the structure so as to ensure that Delhi doesn't control everything, and there's more opportunity around the country for people to build class institutions. Mohan?
All that will fail, Govind, unless you pass a rule that government servants should send their children only to government schools and government go to government hospitals and go to government colleges. That rule will change everything. Or everything else will fail. After 5 years, we're going to meet again, have the same hangout. We're going to repeat the same thing because this has been repeated for the last 40 years. And not much has changed. Only deterioration has happened.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you very much, Mohan, Parth, Shah, Dr. Sadhana Parashar, and Ramya for joining us and sharing your thoughts. We're of course going to come back on the India Hangout very soon. Ayaz, last word, if any?
No, I think as I mentioned, I think it's everybody's desire to see India becoming a literate country, and as I mentioned, it's a soft power. I really take Mohan's point there that you ask the government employees and government servants to put their kids into government schools, and you might see a dramatic improvement in the standards of education.
Thank you very much for watching the India Hangout. We're going to be back.